Welcome to another edition of the RF Video Shoot interview series. Today we're joined by none other than a true legend in the sport of professional wrestling. I don't know how you want me to introduce you, Mock Singh, Bastion Booger, you tell me. Mike Shaw.
Well, they all get used nowadays. Actually, it's funny on the street, more people still refer to me as Norman. I got people walk up to me and just walk up and say, "Norman, how you doing?" And it's funny. People really like that character, and unfortunately, he got killed off by some piss poor management down in Atlanta. But most people call me that or Bastion Booger. Either one's good.
Okay. I guess let's talk early about your career, how you got started in the business. Were you a wrestling fan growing up?
No. I never seen a professional wrestling match in my life. I grew up in northern Michigan, and we didn't have any wrestling on TV. The area I grew up in, we only had 2 TV channels when I was a kid. I'm from a small town of 300 people, and we didn't have any TV to watch. And every now and then, we'd catch a little bit of an old AWA Vern Gagne show on TV at 11 o'clock on Saturday night or whatever, if you got lucky. And that's the only time I'd ever seen wrestling. I never seen a live wrestling match until I was 21 years old.
Oh, wow.
I'd never seen one even, so I did nothing about it. I wrestled in high school, and I wrestled a little bit of some open college tournaments, and I did a little bit of amateur wrestling. I coached wrestling for a couple of years. I was the youngest head varsity wrestling coach in the state of Michigan. I coached at 18 years old, and I got out of that, and then I did some other things. I held a professional boxing license for a while. I got into wrestling. Basically, I got into the professional wrestling when I went down to Florida. I was trying out for a professional slow pitch softball team. And I met a couple of wrestlers, and I started talking to them, and then I went up to Kowalski School in Boston and got trained there.
So when you were down in Florida, it was for, what company was that, for Florida Championship Wrestling?
No, I hadn't started in the business yet. I was actually just living down in Florida, and I met an old wrestler by the name of Farmer Bill. He was working I got a job down there in a car, working for a car company, and he worked in another car company that I delivered to, and he kept telling me, "Why don't you try wrestling?" And I didn't want to. I kept trying to put it off, and then I got into it after that.
Okay. Also, let's talk about your amateur background. You talked a little bit about you wrestled. Did you go to college at all, or no?
No, I never ended up going to college. I'll tell you what happened. I left high school. I was 52-9 in high school. Back then, you didn't get a whole lot of wrestling matches in a year. Nowadays, these kids are getting 50, 60 a year with tournaments and everything else. But the area I grew up in, wrestling wasn't that big. I didn't even have wrestling in my high school until I was a sophomore. We didn't have a team even. And then I got going at that, and I enjoyed it. And then I wrestled in some college open tournaments and did fairly well in those. And I was going to go to Northern Michigan University. They had a wrestling program at that time, pretty good program. And my father passed away. When my father passed away, I ended up staying home with my mother for about a year after that. Then I never ever went to school after that. I never went back to college, so I kind of ended everything right there.
Right.
So
do you think your amateur background helped you get into the business? I mean, did it help you a little bit?
I don't think it mattered.
Right.
I don't think nobody cared. You were kind of an oddity back then if you got in the wrestling business and you had a little bit of an amateur career. I mean, there were some great amateur wrestlers in the business when I was in the business. The Steiners and Mike Rotundo and Steve Williams. I mean, there were some guys who could really wrestle. I was never close to that league. I mean, these guys were elite. But it was kind of odd. I went to wrestle. I was wrestling for Kowalski around the Boston area, and they sent me to a show, one of Vince Senior shows when it was the WWF, I guess it was back then. When they would come through the Boston area, if they were shorter guys, they would call them up and send somebody from the school. And Pedro Morales, who was the Intercontinental Champion or had just been the WWF World Champion at that time, didn't want to wrestle me because he was afraid that I may tie him up or hurt him.
Wow.
And he actually said out loud, "I'm not wrestling this guy," because he amateur wrestled. So I don't think it helped you at all back then. I really don't. What
was the training like at the Kowalski School?
Kowalski had a decent school. I enjoyed being around Walter. He helped me out a lot. Like I said, I come from a small town in northern Michigan, and I flew into Boston. I was kind of awed by the whole deal, and Kowalski took pretty good care of me. The training was good. I think we went Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, if I remember right. We trained at the old Salem, Mass YMCA back then. I think it's a retirement home or something now. I don't think the building's even there anymore. But we trained hard, and we would train. It was a little hot gym upstairs, no air conditioning, no nothing. But we trained hard, and Walter he's a legend in this business, and he trained us right. He taught us to wrestle, taught us to work, and taught us to respect the business, which has got lost in the 20 years since then. Guys don't seem to worry about that anymore.
Right. Did you ever get scared off during training, or said this is too much?
No. I seen a lot of guys come and go. It was funny. I had a friend from New Hampshire. He was in the business for quite a while. His name is Danny Patiglio. He wrestled as Danny O out in Vancouver with me for a while. Then he went down to California and wrestled for a couple of promotions. And we were horsing around there. We had a black guy come in from Alabama or someplace, and he was a really good bump taker, Danny was. And we backed him into the corner, and I took him out and gave him a big beeline. He took his big, huge bump. The guy opened the door and walked out and never came back. So scared the hell out of him, but, yeah, he never come back. So, some guys didn't last long. Guys didn't last a week. Or, some guys didn't last a workout. Or,
right.
Yeah, it's,
I guess take us through your training as far as, what did you learn first? Psychology, bumping, or...
No, I don't think we got into bumping too much. We learned Kowalski was more into the psychology of the business. He was more into building up the business. I mean, he was such a good heel. I mean, he was a tremendous heel. He taught us how to work and how to put a match together. And it was funny back then. Never once did he ever tell us anything about the business that that anything was set up or anything. I mean, he just taught us to work and taught us moves and kind of left everything up to us to figure the rest out. And he never once uttered the words, because he didn't know who was going to quit or go expose the business or what, And
right.
I remember we were eating dinner one night together, and we had a couple of the young students with us, and somebody asked him who his partner was when he was the Executioners, and one of the young students blurted it out. This was 10 years after they hadn't been the Executioners anymore. Kowalski just reamed them out.
Wow.
Whenever we wore masks, why do you want to expose that? And so he protected it. They protected it every day.
Right.
And that's the way we started. Hell, when I was first couple of years I was in the business, the first 10 years I was in the business, if you were in a bar or a restaurant and if you were a heel and a babyface walked in, you left. You didn't even stay. I mean, now they basically holding hands going through airports and everything else, so it's just so much different. It's unbelievable.
I liked it back then, by the way.
Yeah, me too.
It was better. Too. As far as training, what was the hardest thing for you to pick up in training?
I think the hardest thing, like we talked about earlier, I think the hardest thing was breaking off the amateur attitude. I've seen a lot of good amateur wrestlers come. Like, I spent 7 years in Calgary, and Stu Hart was always fascinated with these wrestlers and bodybuilders and weightlifters. And a lot of amateur wrestlers can't get the mentality that that's a business. They just can't figure that out. And I think it took me a little while to realize it was a business, and it really kills their ego if they have to lose or do a job or something. I mean, it just crushes them, and you got to realize that you're in a business now. I mean, it's just that. But I've seen a lot of them gold medal winners, Olympic wrestlers, college wrestling champions that just couldn't make it in this business. Because they couldn't separate it.
Right. Huh. As far as your first match, what are your memories of your first match?
My first match was in Westerly, Rhode Island. I went down there and wrestled a guy by the name of TV Ricky Sexton, who probably was more in love with himself than he was anybody else in the world. I don't know if you were familiar with old Ricky or not, but we came back into the locker room in Rhode Island. It was Kowalski's promotion, and we came back in, and I ended up having close to 4,000 or 5,000 matches in my career. And when we walked back in the locker room, Ricky Sexton said to me, "Hey, kid, that's the best match you'll ever have in your life." Huh. And I remember Kowalski blurted out, "I fucking hope it's not, because it stunk."
Right.
So kind of killed my ego, and it kind of killed Ricky's ego too, because he'd been around for about 30 years, I guess. And but that was his. And he always bragged about he had the best calves in the business. Ricky Sexton used to always do these calf raisers. And so I'm a young kid in this locker room thinking, "Yeah, this guy's a kook." I couldn't believe the guys were that worried about things like that. So
right.
Yeah.
You wrestled, I guess, in your fourth match was at the Boston Gardens.
Yeah, that was.
How did that happen?
One of those things we were talking about earlier with when we used to come through and be short of guys. And I'm a big sports fan. I never grew up being a wrestling fan. And I was kind of awed, and I was trying to read the banners, Celtics and Bruins, and just being in the Boston Garden was amazing to me. I mean, like I said, my hometown was 300 people, and hell, I'm standing in the ring in the Boston Garden was pretty amazing to me. But Kowalski hooked that up for me. They called up and said they needed one guy, and he drove me down there, and we wrestled, and it was kind of neat. We went out to dinner with Bruno was there that night, and a couple of big names, so it was nice for me,
Right.
But Kowalski treated me really well. I couldn't ever express how well he treated me. His wrestling school was kind of a novelty back then. There wasn't that many of them, so we used to get a lot of TV companies come in and want to do shows. There was R.D. Johnson came there, and they had a show called Games People Play, and the news was there all the time, and it was always there, and he would always use me in those, and it was kind of funny because the people back home in my hometown were watching them, so it was really neat. And then he was a photographer at that time as well. He was taking pictures of athletes and stuff, so when we'd go down to Providence and stuff and take pictures of Marvin Hagler and stuff, he'd always take me with, and so, for a small town kid, I got to meet a lot of pretty interesting people right off the bat, so it was nice.
That's good.
Yeah.
Did any of the vets ever give you any advice, take you under their wing?
Well, when I got to WCW, I got a lot of help from Terry Funk.
Really?
Terry Funk helped me immensely with the Norman character. Eddie Gilbert helped me with the Norman character. Kelvin Sullivan was there at that time. Terry Funk probably took me in more than anybody ever took me in.
Even before, I mean, that was obviously after.
That was quite a. Nobody took you in much in the smaller promotions. You got to the smaller promotions, you were kind of on your own. I left Vancouver, was my first full-time territory. I went there and wrestled for Gene Kiniski and a guy named Al Tomko. And Kiniski and Tomko were both kind of egomaniacs. They were both late in their years, and they both wanted to wrestle and win every night and everything else, and basically kill their own promotion. But then I went to Calgary, and we jumped into Calgary, and things went real well there for me. I was doing average in Calgary. I was kind of a middle guy, up and down here and there. Then I got my break with Owen Hart, and we went about 2 years back and forth there every night.
Some of the best stuff. I remember all that stuff.
We had tables, chairs, cages. I mean, I give Bruce Hart credit. He took a lot of hell for doing silly stuff, but he was probably 20 years ahead of his time in promoting. He was doing stuff that WWF and them did years later. He brought in hockey players, and he brought in Brian Adams, and we had lights and music and smoke. We were doing that way ahead of the big promotions.
Right.
And it was good. I mean, we're packing the places every night. I mean, we were doing big business there.
What are your memories of Gene Kiniski? Gene
was an odd character. He would only come around every now and then when he wanted to wrestle, and I had respect for him. I was my first year in the business, and here's a former world champion, but he seemed to sit back and I could never really figure out what the hell was going on in Vancouver, because they claimed Gene Kiniski, Al Tomko, and Don Owens out of Portland all owned that company together. Well, Don would only send his guys up on every second Monday to be on TV, because the TV got shown over the border, so he was promoting his own guys. Right. They never wrestled a territory. They just come up and did TV and sent it back to Oregon, so nobody could ever figure that out. You're having Buddy Rose and Rip Oliver and Youngbloods come up and wrestle on TV, and then we go on the road. We didn't have anybody, and people are going, what the hell? Where are these guys?
Right.
Then it got around to Gene. It happened to me. They built me up as a big lumberjack babyface as Klondike Mike, and they got me over pretty good there, the best they could. And then Gene wants to come in and just knock you off. I mean, he'd come in like every 4 months and just knock whoever was off. Didn't matter if you were a heel, he'd come in as a babyface. If you were a babyface, he'd come in as a heel. He just wanted to knock you off.
Huh.
And people seen through it. I mean, it didn't make any sense.
Right.
So you're killing your own. Then he wouldn't go on the road either. He would just beat you in Vancouver in the biggest house we had. So it just didn't make any sense.
Right, it's bad business.
Yeah, you're cutting your own throat.
What about Klondike Bill? Or I'm sorry, Klondike Mike. What was that all about?
That's the character I used in Vancouver originally. I went in there, and they had back in the 60s, I guess, they had a Klondike Bill or something along that lines. And it's funny, we looked amazingly alike. we looked a lot alike. When they first showed me a picture of him, I was shocked. Yeah, I think they just tried to capitalize on it. They just went ahead and put the bib overalls on me and went with the character. It got over pretty good. But I think the older wrestling fans realized they were trying to just knock it off of the original guy. When we would go farther up north, like in around the Prince George area and stuff, where you had a lot of older wrestling fans, they would say, but they promoted it as he was my uncle, so they got away with it a little bit, So it was a good character. We had some good times with it.
You also teamed with Dean Ho, I believe.
Yeah.
What do you remember teaming
Dean Ho's a tremendously nice guy. One of the nicest guys I met in this business. I guess he had wrestled in that area, in that era, the 60s and 70s, and had been a big star there. And I believe his wife might have been from that area, so they had moved back up there. And yeah, I believe we were Canadian tag team champions together for a while. And yeah, it was we had a lot of fun with him. He taught me a lot about the business. He would I wouldn't say he took me under his wing, but when he would do TV or house shows that I was at, he would say, "Don't let them do this kind of stuff to you. You're a big guy. Take care of yourself," And he would try to educate me on the business, because I was green as goose shit when I went up there. I had 10 matches when I went to Vancouver, and so it was I was pretty green. All of a sudden I'm in the main events, and you don't know any better, So, but he was a nice guy, tremendous guy.
How did you like living in Canada and stuff like that compared to the States?
I enjoyed Canada. I lived couple years in Vancouver, beautiful area, and then I was 7 years in Calgary with Stampede. Then I went back and forth. I was in Montreal for 2 summers. Then I went to the Atlantic Grand Prix out for Dupree for 3 summers, I believe. My wife's Canadian. I met her in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and both my kids were born in Canada. So Yeah, I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun up there.
Did you get to go to Banff, I think it was called?
Oh, yeah, we went to Banff, Lake Louise.
That's awesome.
You could probably throw a handful of darts at a map in Canada, and I've wrestled in those towns for somebody. You know, there's a lot of. I've been there. Crap, I was in every town in Canada, as far as I know.
As far as this travel, what was that like in Canada? Because I think we did a couple interviews with guys in the wintertime. They said it was crazy.
I didn't realize how bad it was till I left. You know, we would jump in vans and go 500 miles in snowstorms. I don't know if you'll be able to pick it up on camera. I got a big scar on my hand right here. We went in a ditch. We left Calgary, Alberta, and we were driving up to Edmonton, which is a 180-mile trip. We left. I had shorts and a T-shirt on in the damn mountains there. They used to get these Chinook winds, and we got 90 miles right in the middle of the Red Deer. There was a snowstorm. We drove in the ditch, and we're trying to push the thing out, and the taillight broke and cut my hand pretty bad. And we spent the night in the ditch. We didn't get out till the next morning.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was brutal. Regina, Saskatchewan, and I mean, you're not just going. You know, you live out east out here or something in bigger cities, you drive 500 miles, you're on a good highway. You drive 500 miles out there, 300 of it might be through a prairie where you don't see nothing.
That's crazy.
You know,
did you have to go on the lakes at all when they were frozen at all, or no?
No.
Okay.
I heard of those trips up to the Yukon and that area, crossing lakes and frozen lakes to go on the Indian reservations. Luckily, I didn't do any of those.
That's crazy stuff. Memories of South Africa, your tours of South Africa.
My memories of South Africa are the most beautiful country I ever went to. I wrestled in 32 different countries. And my daughter and I actually tried to remember them all the other night. We couldn't. But it was the most beautiful country I ever went to. I felt bad about the apartheid. There was people were treated terrible there. Blacks were treated terrible. Probably, I can't say the best wrestling promoter I ever wrestled for, but Bull Heifer, the original promoter I went there for, has to be tied with whoever else I'd put tied for one. He treated me fantastic. He brought me in. They put me up in a nice apartment. I stayed there for 3-4 months at a time. You only wrestled once or twice a week.
Wow.
You would go to Cape Town, Johannesburg, bigger towns in the soccer stadiums and stuff. And the wrestling was terrible. The wrestlers were horrible. I mean, big, stiff, grizzly old guys that were hard. And I mean, a lot of guys would. You asked me earlier about training. I seen guys come in here and wrestle one night and go home.
Wow.
They were just. There was nothing to just have guys hit you. It was 3/4 of shoots when he went to South Africa. They had this world champion named Jan Wilkins. He was like wrestling a cement mixer. I mean, it was just horrible, but he drew big money, and I got paid on a percentage there, so I wanted to work with him.
Right.
You know, and then they had another guy named Mike Skitta, who I really admired. He was the 4th-rated heavyweight boxer in the world at one time. He signed a contract. I read it, or else I might not believe it. He had it hanging on his wall at his house. He signed it. Muhammad Ali signed it. His promoter signed it. Don King signed it. And I believe it was Angelo Dundee that signed it. It was a done deal. He trained for 6 or 8 weeks over there. Very hard to breathe there because it's a high altitude, so he had to be in tremendous shape. He went to the airport to come to fight Ali in the Madison Square Garden, and the South African government denied his visa. They said it would be an embarrassment if you come to America and lose to a black man.
Wow.
And he ended up being an alcoholic, and he got into wrestling, and it was tough on him, but I seen some pictures of him when he fought. I seen some old videos. Unbelievably tough. I mean, he would just walk straight in and fight. He knocked me out cold in a match one night. He did this thing where he would start throwing punches at him, and they had a very strict wrestling commission over there. You used to have to go there and do a wrestling test and pass it before you could get a license to wrestle there.
Right.
And
what kind of test would it be?
You had to get on a mat in a little hot, sweaty wrestling room. They had these old guys in suits and ties, and wrestling commission. They had these big badges and stuff on. And you'd have to roll around with a guy for, I think it was 4 minutes, and then take a rest, and then do another guy. And they had some good amateur wrestlers there. You had to basically show that you could defend yourself. You didn't have to beat the guy or nothing, but you had to take care of yourself.
Right. And
they would sign off and give you a license. Well, you start doing this thing with Mike Skitter where you start punching at him, and he didn't want to hit box because that was against the wrestling rules. Finally, the crowd would go nuts, and you throw one punch. Well, he missed and caught me right on the edge of the nose one night and knocked me out cold. Just white, boom, I was down. So these guys can, these legitimate boxers, they can punch. I mean, he hit me so hard I couldn't believe it. I mean, he felt terrible, but he knocked the hell out of me.
All right. Now, from there, you went back to Canada and you worked for Stu Hart.
Right.
For Calgary Stampede.
Yeah.
What are some of your early memories of Stu Hart? What was he like?
Stu was a great guy. Stu had one problem: he had too many kids.
Right.
Half the family was working for him, and it seemed like half the family was usually working against him. Obviously, Brett went on to have a good career. Owen, other than the tragedy, had a great career. Bruce put a lot of work into the territory. Ross put a lot of work into the territory. Kind of the unsung hero there was Wayne Hart, who refereed and wrestled every now and then. But he worked his ass off. He would put the ring up. He would drive the vans. He would make sure everything got taken care of. Wayne was kind of always the black sheep out there, but he was always one of the hardest workers. And I tried to call him the other day, and I had the wrong number, so I never did get a hold of him. And then you had 4 sisters who were all married wrestlers. So
All right.
I think out of the 12 kids, I wrestled, let me think, 6 of the 8 boys and all 4 son-in-laws.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
One sister was married to Jim, obviously, Neidhart. One was married to Ben Bassarab. One was married to Davey Boy. And then another one was married to BJ, who owned a gym there, who wrestled part-time.
Teddy's dad.
Yeah. Who should have... Well, BJ was horrible. We'll leave it at that.
Right.
Should have never wrestled. Nice guy, just should have never wrestled.
I hear you. No, there was another Hart. Was it Ross Hart, who was also he was like the black sheep too?
Yeah, Ross kind of ran the TV. He would set up the interview times. Him and Bruce tried to run the business, basically. Ross was around the business. Ross, I don't think, was that much of a black sheep, other than he took care of a lot of the nitpicky stuff with the guys, so the guys were always kind of pissed off at him all the time. You know, he would deal with business end of it and deal with this guy and deal with that guy. And, Ross was okay. He was he did a lot for the promotion. He did put the TV show together all the time and all that kind of stuff. He did a lot of work for the promotion.
Did you have a lot of interaction with Stu Hart?
Mostly on Fridays, I would see him because we made our TV tapings in Calgary. And then sometimes he would make a trip up to Edmonton on Saturday. He had a lot of old buddies, old wrestlers and boxers up in Edmonton. He'd make the trip with us every now and then. And most of my time spent with Stu. We sat and talked about old timers, then the old wrestlers, and like Kowalski and that type of guy that was around during his day.
Right.
Stu was a tremendous guy. I mean, it was just, I would have liked Stu if he wouldn't have been a promoter I worked for. He's just kind of guy that I liked being around. He's a rugged guy, and he was straight. Whatever he said, done. I mean, he used me for 7 years, so what can I say? He used me well.
Right.
So he liked big guys. He liked having big wrestlers up there. That was his thing. He liked amateur style wrestlers. He liked muscle. He liked bodies, and yeah, he was a great guy.
Did you ever get to go to the dungeon?
Oh yeah.
Okay. What was that like?
I never got into the dungeon to get stretched or beat up, but I watched a lot of other people.
All right. I guess tell us about some of your memories of watching some of the guys get stretched.
I remember one specifically. I was up at the house on an Easter Sunday. I don't know his name because so many guys come and gone through that territory so quick, but they had a black guy there, big guy, 250, 260, well built, and Stu locked a hold on him down there, and Helen, the mother, actually came down, Mrs. Hart, and was screaming, "Let that poor kid up! It's Easter Sunday!" And I have it on videotape.
Wow.
I have it on videotape of her hollering to let him up, and if I didn't have so much respect for Mrs. Hart and Stu, I could probably make a lot of money selling it, but I won't.
Right.
Yeah, it was funny though. I mean, this guy is just screaming. Stu's got him all locked up and grinding his face in the mat, got his elbow in his ear, and yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting to see.
Now, Brett was already gone, I think, when you were there, or was he still
Brett
there?
was there about a year. My first year there, he was there.
Okay.
Brett was there doing almost all the main events.
Just like 82, maybe? 80?
I think I went to Calgary originally in 81.
Okay.
I left Vancouver. Well, I started for Stu on Christmas Day. It probably would have been 81.
Okay.
So I left Kowalski in 80, and I spent over a year in Vancouver. So, yeah, I think it would have. I originally only went over there to do a battle royal. I was in Vancouver, and they didn't have enough people to fill up a battle royal. And then I got there, and they liked me, so I stayed. So.
Wow, that's a long time. Because you were there when Liger was there, right? It's Kimchi Yamada?
Yeah.
It was the Vietcong Express?
Yeah, Vietcong Express.
Yeah,
we had
Hossie?
Yeah, we had Kong Express 1 and 2 at that time, yeah. One was Hossie, I believe, yeah. We had a lot of Japanese guys. I mean, it's hard for me to remember all of them. Oh, man, that was a hotbed for Japanese for a long time. They had Hito there taking care of them, and yeah, it was good.
What are your early memories of Bret Hart?
When I first went in there, the Vancouver tape that we made in Vancouver was shown across the entire country of Canada. And Brett didn't like or have any respect for anybody that come from Vancouver because he thought it was the minor leagues or bush leagues. So he didn't have much time for me. He didn't have anything much to do with me. He didn't have much to do with me until I probably had my run with Owen. And then, we became a little bit closer and a little bit friendlier. And I know when I went down to do my tryout with WWF, he came to me and said, here's what Vince is going to look for. He wants you to be aggressive. He wants to be that. And I heard he put a good word in with me with Vince. So I don't got any hard feelings with Brett or any problems with him. We were just never very close.
Right.
You know, it wasn't like we were buddies or ever did anything together. Or, you know, I didn't see him much after he went to WWF. He was gone. But, you know, great talent, good talent. And we never hit it off. We never spent any time together.
How did the idea come up to change your gimmick to Mock and Sing?
I don't know about that myself. We had Gamma Singh there, who was pretty hot as a junior heavyweight heel. And my name being Mike, I believe they asked Gamma, and I believe the Indian translation, the Pakistani translation is Maka, is Mike, is Maka. So they just threw the Singh on it because of Gamma Singh, and we hooked up, and the thing got red hot. I mean, I used to walk downtown Calgary. One day I was walking with my wife. We weren't even married at that time, and some guy just rolled down his car window, jumped out, threw a full can of Coke right at our heads. Oh. Just missed our heads by like an inch or two, you know, and fucking Packy, go home. And I mean, they know I'm not a Packy, right. You know, but they, you know, it's a natural heat there because they don't like the East Indians, and especially in that Western Canada area, you know. So, you know, there's a lot of them in Toronto area, but there's pretty heavy heat. Yeah, pretty heavy.
Some of the promos you did were awesome.
Yeah, we had fun. We had a lot of fun.
Good promos. As far as the promos, did they give you a storyline to stick to, or did they go out there and do your own stuff?
Yeah, we did our own. We used to do them right after we would do TV on Friday night, and we would take time to cool off or whatever, and then we'd go back out and do the interviews in the... hell, a lot of them we'd do right when we were done. I used to remember finishing a match and not getting out of the ring. Ed Whalen would climb in, you'd do it right on the spot. And yeah, they didn't give us much much guideline of what to do or say.
Did you have a lot of fun with that gimmick?
Oh, yeah. We had a lot of fun with that one. That was a good one.
What are your memories of announcing with Ed Whalen?
I really like Ed as a person, but Ed was so hell-bent on being a celebrity in Calgary, which he was. He had the hockey, and he did the rodeo, and he did everything else, that he didn't want to be around the foolishness of wrestling. He didn't want to have the blood. He didn't want to have anybody getting hit in the balls, or because his business people would say, "Geez, what do you do? What are you around that for?" So he would always try to reel us back in. Him and Bruce Hart probably hated each other, it's safe to say, because Bruce wanted to go balls to the walls and do everything in the world, and Ed would always reel it back in. But Ed would do it.
Did he have power there?
Oh, he controlled the TV. He took the show off the air a couple times.
Oh, okay.
He was at the TV station since the day they opened the door. He was the first announcer they ever had.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, he had a lot of stroke with the TV station, and he wouldn't come to Bruce or Ross or whoever was controlling it. He would go to Stu. Say, Stu, I'm going to take the show off the air if you don't reel it back in.
But wasn't he a paid employee of the company?
He was paid, yeah. He was paid by Stu and by the TV station to do that.
Oh, okay.
So he was getting both.
Huh.
But he had a lot of stroke with the TV. Oh, yeah, he walked off a couple times, during the show. He walked out.
Huh.
So...
No, there was another announcer, too. I forgot his name right now.
We had another little guy there named Jim Davies.
Right.
Let me have a quick... I'm trying to lose my voice.
No problem.
I've had some throat trouble in the last week or so. Davies was a newspaper writer, and he had a thing called Page 6 in the Calgary Sun. Every day he had a little blip about what was going on in Calgary, but we had a lot of fun with him. I call it Pumpkin-Headed Dwarf, we called him, and oh, God, we destroyed the guy around Calgary. But he was a good sport. He took it all. He didn't complain, and he took it all. It was good.
Did you ever rib Ed Whalen at all?
Oh, yeah. I had a lot of fun with Ed. Ed and I had a respect for each other because I don't think I ever crossed his line. I wouldn't swear on TV with him. I wouldn't. And Ed had a thing with me when I would be doing a hard interview or heavy interview with him. If he didn't like it, he would go to the ropes and just drop the microphone, and he would be waving it off like, I can't listen to this idiot no more. Huh. And he's telling me he wanted to get out of it at that time, so I just left it.
Right.
So I'd be done. But he would let me go a little bit farther because I think he realized I knew when to stop.
Right.
So yeah, it was different.
As far as the wrestling matches themselves, they had some different rules up there in Canada.
Yeah, they had that card system, yellow and red cards, and
penalties and stuff. Do you think that added to the matches and stuff?
I think it added to the interest because nobody else was really doing it, and
I don't remember exactly what it was. Do you remember what the system was? 2
yellow cards ended up being a red card, and I think the red you were disqualified.
Okay.
Yellow was like a warning, and something along that line. They brought that over from England. Some of the English boys brought that over, and we're doing that. So Yeah, it was different. I haven't thought about that for a while. Yeah, we used that system for quite a while.
Every match was the same, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was a good way to make an angle because you could always get somebody disqualified or get rid of them. You know, they could DQ you and
right.
And then they had a little, I can't remember his name now, they had a heel referee there for a long time. And he would just red card the babyface, and then that would be a whole new story. And
right.
Hell, after a few months, they had to have him wrestle because he got more heat than the guys.
What are your memories or thoughts on your series with Brian Pillman, the late Brian Pillman?
I had Pillman, a little deal with Pillman twice. I had him in Calgary, mostly in 6- and 8-man tags. I don't think I did much with Pillman as a single in Calgary, so I had Owen most of the time. But then I had him again in WCW when I was Norman. Him and I had a couple of real good matches on the Clash of Champions where they come to me and said, you know, kind of dump the character tonight and just wrestle like Mucka Singh. And so we had a couple of good matches. Brian was a decent talent. I don't know what he had, a few evils there, I guess, always that caught up with him. But he was a good talent. He was a good athlete. He was hurt a lot. He got hurt quite a bit, unfortunately. But I don't have much other memories with Pillman. I don't. It's never like it was a high point in my career to remember what I did with him, other than the couple of Clash of Champions we did in WCW were pretty good.
All right. As far as Owen Hart, you talked a little bit about Owen. What are your memories of Owen?
Best babyface I wrestled. We his and I angle went for a couple of years strong in Calgary, all through the Western Canada, and it was a fluke. He was supposed to wrestle somebody else, Kerry Brown, who had quite a bit of heat there as a heel, and Kerry didn't want to put him over. They wanted to have an angle where Kerry got beat. I believe Kerry might have had the North American belt, and they were going to come back and wrestle. And he refused, so they threw me in. I'd already wrestled once that night, earlier in the show, and it took off, and then it was hot. I did things with him that I've never done with any other wrestler ever. You know, he was a good talent.
You think he was way before his time?
Oh, I can't say he was before his time in Calgary because we had Dynamite Kid and them doing some of that stuff there earlier, so they had seen some of that stuff. But he learned a lot from watching those guys and preparing from those guys, and he put his own stuff into it. He was kind of like a wrestling heel, but people loved him. He punch, kick, do all the crazy stuff, but they loved him, so he got away with it.
Right.
I think he got wasted for quite a few years in WWF. I think there were some problems there, personal problems with or whatever.
Right.
But they wasted him for a long time.
Have you ever been on the receiving end of any of his ribs at all, or no?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Anything that sticks out?
This happened, unfortunately, it happened shortly before he got his accident. He had called my house a couple of times and told me that he wanted me to come into WWF as his partner and was leaving it. He could do a lot of different voices. He could do Stu, he could do a lot of, and I know it was him, so I was going to let it go for a while, then end it, and unfortunately I didn't get to end it. But one thing about Calgary that I wasn't around a lot of his direct ribs and jokes because we always stayed separate there. We had a heel vehicle and we had a babyface vehicle, so most of that real heavy ribbing was all the baby faces.
Right.
They basically hated each other because they were on the road together, all catching hell from each other. The heels were easy going. We're supposed to be the badasses around the road having a good time, and the baby faces all hated each other. So yeah, that was we never traveled together there. That was one. We protected the business pretty hard. So most of that stuff was done in the babyface end of the Calgary.
Right. Now, as far as Dynamite Kid, did you get to meet Dynamite?
Oh, sure.
What was Dynamite like?
Good guy too. He was a real good guy. There's a guy that was ahead of his time. I mean, he was. When he was in Calgary, a lot of times we didn't have anybody that could keep up with him. I mean, he was that good. I mean, he was a tremendous talent, and he got hurt too. I guess he's in a wheelchair now, I believe, or something like that. And he just a great talent. I mean, he'd go to Japan and just come back, and when he come back from Japan, he would do the most unbelievable stuff. But I guess that's where he originally hurt his back. He did a suplex with somebody from the apron to the floor, and he hit the fence around the thing or whatever. He told me the story that he knows that's the first time he ever really hurt his back. And he just kept going. He was a tough kid. He just kept wrestling until he used himself up.
Right.
He couldn't go anymore. He was done.
What about Davey Boy?
Davey Boy was always a little bit more standoffish. I mean, I had some good times with Davey, horsing around with him. Davey and I and Brett and I were kind of similar. We were never very close. We worked a lot of times together and made a few trips here and there together. But Davey and I were never very close as far as talking or hanging out or anything along that lines. I did more with Owen and Dynamite, you know.
Did you get to work Dynamite a lot up there? Or?
Yeah, I did actually. I had a partner there, Big Gary Albright, who they brought in as Boca Singh.
Right.
Boca Singh. He was a tremendous amateur wrestler too, but we went around with them for a couple of months, wrestling for the Stampede belts and heavyweight or tag belts and stuff, and we had a pretty good run with them, actually, good little angle with them. And I wrestled Dynamite a lot more than I ever wrestled Davey. I might have wrestled Davey, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 times, where I probably wrestled Dynamite 100. You know, I wrestled Dynamite quite a bit.
What about Chris Benoit?
Chris is good. I mean, I remember him hanging around when he was a little kid. You know, he was a young kid. He wanted to get into business, and you know, he kept training. He got big, and now he's a star.
Did you see it back in the day? Did you realize he would be to where he was?
When we first seen him in the ring, we knew he was going to be good. Yeah, we didn't know where he was getting his training because he was up in Edmonton, but they must have had a ring set up or whatever. And then when they brought him down there, I mean, he was like a little Dynamite kid. Is what he was. He was a baby Dynamite kid, which is what he wanted to do. And I just talked to him. I got a note from him not too long ago. Actually, I'm glad he's doing good.
How did you wind up leaving the territory? How did that happen? Well, actually, before you left, do you have any memories that stick out from that time period?
Calgary?
Yeah.
Oh, geez, we could have made this whole tape on talking about Calgary, probably. I was sad to see the business start going downhill. It bothered me because I know what Stu and most of the family had put into it, and it was still doing pretty good when I was there.
What do you attribute it to, as far as going downhill?
Vince's TV. Vince put his TV on up there. Our TV used to be on from 1 to 2, and he'd put his on it from 2 to 3. So then he'd come in every 3 or 4 months and run your big arenas, run Calgary, run Edmonton. So it was like the circus coming through. People would rather wait and spend $20 to see that than spend $6 or $7 every Friday to see us.
Right.
So it got hard. Then you come back into that territory. Excuse me. You come back into that territory with Brett and Jim and guys they knew. I mean, we all of a sudden we became minor league all of a sudden.
All right.
And I think that's what people started looking at it as.
Do you think that hurt the company too? That Stu's own kids went to work for Vince?
I think if they would have went to work for Vince and never come back into Alberta and wrestled in their hometown for somebody else.
Right.
And then it was odd because it was almost like we were trying to, not we were, I shouldn't say, but it was almost like Stampede was trying to help them. We had a weekly program, and if they were coming in 2 weeks, in our program would be pictures of Hogan and Brett and everybody else. So people are saying, geez, I mean, even these guys are plugging them. You know, so I think, I don't know if it was pride that Jim and Brett were there and or what, but I mean, we were cutting our own throat there, you know.
Right.
And people that were taking care of our business, Bruce and them, the other half of the family, realized that. And we were hurting ourselves.
Why do you think they made the deal with Vince? To give him Brett and... I
don't know. When Brett and them took off and went there, I didn't hear nothing reason why or anything, you know. And I know Brett tried to get in there a long time because they used to come in and do some TV tapings in Toronto and stuff, and he wanted to get in there bad, and maybe it was his move. Maybe he wanted to go.
All right.
You know, so.
As far as Jim Neidhart, what are some of your early memories of Jim?
Jim was a funny guy. Jim was one of my greatest memories of Jim was. They used to have, we spent a lot of time together. We traveled a lot, hotels, arenas, and all kinds of stuff together, obviously. But they used to con guys, and they're trying to sing, and Jim would sing this horrible song, Peggy Sue. And he thought he could sing it. That was the funny part. It was always dreadful. But he was such a good athlete. I mean, he could have played pro football. He was an international shot put champion. He was,
right.
The name Anvil, I mean, he legitimately threw that thing. He picked the anvil up at, I don't know, I think it was a couple 100 pounds in Calgary and threw it like twice as far as the guy that was supposed to be the world champion.
Huh.
So that's how he got the name. I mean, just tremendous power. He could run. He was fast. I mean, yeah, I had a couple of football helmet matches with him, and man, you could just tell what a good athlete he was.
Right.
You know? Yeah, Jim was a good talent. He got a good break there.
What were the stipulations in the football helmet match?
Not to get hit by Jim.
Right.
Yeah, it was. I believe we just kept lining up in a 3-point stance and hitting heads like rams until one of us finally gave up, which was always me because he was supposed to have been the football player, which he was.
Right.
He had 2 different tryouts, I believe, with the Raiders and Cowboys or somebody. And, yeah, that was, I mean, we had every kind of match in the world. We had hockey stick matches, hockey glove matches. I mean,
right.
I don't think there was a match we didn't have.
What was your fondest memory of Stampede?
My fondest memory of Stampede would have been the angle with Owen.
With Owen.
Oh yeah, by far. No contest there. We had. I mean, it was. I don't want to sit here and blow smoke up anybody's rear end or up my own or anything else, but it was a tremendous angle. We went into towns that were. I mean, there was people lined up outside, just packed. I mean, it was good. It was good every night.
What were the houses like up there?
Oh, I mean, well, we ended up going from the pavilion to the corral and then up to the next building. So, I mean, we were going up bigger buildings constantly. I don't know what the numbers were.
Right.
I wasn't into numbers or anything at that time. I had a weekly guarantee with Stu. My pay was the same. So, but yeah, it was good. Very good.
How'd you wind up going to WCW? How'd that call come about?
That was really strange. I was living in Calgary, and I had made a trip to South Africa. I went to Africa the fourth or fifth time I went, and when I got back, my wife told me that somebody had called named Jim Ross and wanted me to call him. I didn't know who Jim was. I didn't call.
Right.
I said, I don't want to go to. He said it was an Atlanta number. I said, nah. I was contemplating getting out of the business at that time.
Huh.
I was Calgary was wrapping up, and I just got married, and I was looking at moving back home to Michigan, and I told her, I said, after this Africa trip, I made decent money in Africa, and I said, I'm going to grab that money and we'll move back home, and I wanted to wrap it up. I was actually going to be done.
What would you have done?
I was looking at a couple different things. I was actually contemplating going to school, and I wanted to teach. I was interested in being a gym teacher and coaching sports or something along that line. And then I never watched wrestling on TV. I still don't. I never have. It didn't interest me. So when they left me messages, it was WCW. I didn't know what it was.
Huh. Wow.
And I'm in Calgary. I wasn't watching TBS. I wasn't. Finally, somebody said, "Geez, that's the Atlanta group, the old NWA. You might want to call them." So I called them, and they flew me down the next day and had me do a bunch of canned interviews and as Norman, and they liked it. And I said, hell, they started making me offers for a year or 2 years, and I said, I might as well give this a shot. And we went down there and did it. I like WCW. I liked working there.
Who came up with the whole idea? I guess when you went down there, take us through the process of you getting down there and all that.
I flew into Atlanta, and they had a car waiting for me or whatever, and they took me to the Omni Hotel, and I went into the Omni, and Jim Ross had left me a couple of messages and said, I'll pick you up tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock or whatever. And we went and did interviews for the whole day. I mean, we did just Norman after Norman as a heel, as a crazy character, Norman Bates or whatever you want to say. And I went home. I went back to Calgary for a little bit. I think I went back down and did some more interviews. And then I just went down and started. They brought me down to one of these Clash of Champions or something and hooked me up with Teddy Long. And they brought me out on a stretcher or something. And we started going from that. But right from day one, you could tell it was going to be a babyface character. People liked it.
Right.
Kids were crazy about it. And they didn't like Teddy controlling me and stuff like that. So the biggest problem there was so damn many bookers. I mean, you had Flair and you had Kevin Sullivan was one of the bookers at one time, and I think one time they had a committee of like 7.
Yeah.
So you never knew from one TV to the next what was going on.
Huh.
And then they brought Ole in, who was a complete jackass, and he killed the character off. He wanted to bring it back to the 1950s. He said, we're going to bring this back to wrestling. Well, by that point, the business was gone. Nobody cared anymore. It was entertainment.
Right.
There was no wrestling anymore. You couldn't go up to Virginia and Ohio where they were in the 60s. They didn't care either. They wanted to see show.
Right.
So he killed it off and made it Trucker Norman, which just killed the character. And I give Sting and Lex Luger credit. They went in and talked to Jim Herd, who was in charge of wrestling at that time, that didn't know a wrist lock from a wristwatch. And he said, no, we turned control over to Ole, and if he wants to switch it, we're letting him. And they said, you guys are making a big mistake. The character's as popular as us. I was getting 300 teddy bears a week in arenas, donating them to children's hospitals, getting a lot of publicity out of it. And he went ahead and killed it off. And some of that came from, I was traveling with Terry Funk, and Terry and Ole didn't like each other. And Ole was always worried that Terry was going to get the book. And so he was trying to kill off all the characters and make his own and stuff like that, and there's all politics. That's when the business started to suck.
Right. Who came up with the actual gimmick for Norman Lunatic?
Oh, excuse me. I don't really know. Jim Ross, I believe. I'd have to say Jim Ross, maybe. Eddie Gilbert was on the booking committee at that time. He had a little bit to do with it.
What were your initial impressions of Jim Ross?
Like I said, I didn't know who he was. So, I liked Jim. He treated me well when I was there. And he let me do a little bit of announcing there at WCW when I was there a couple times, and yeah, Jim treated me well. Jim treated me good. I like Jim.
What impressions did you have of WCW when you first got there?
It was a mess. Nobody knew what was going on from week to week, and then they put me under contract, which was good with me. I mean, I was making good money, but in the battle to get their own friends and buddies established, I was getting paid 5-6 weeks and just staying home.
Huh.
I wasn't even going on the road.
Right.
You'd call up and say, "What's this? What do you care? You're getting paid." Well, that's no way to run a business. I got more pride than that. I wanted to work. I wanted to be on the road. And they didn't care. They just, it was Turner's money. I guess they didn't care. They were playing with it.
Right.
It was. I was a little bit upset, or not upset, I shouldn't say, because I'm not around the business that much anymore. I was a little bit surprised when Vince bought them out, because I think it actually hurt him in the long run, because people were always a little bit interested in the two groups, who was better, who wasn't better. Now that it's just him, there's no competition.
Right.
Sure.
Yes.
So I was a little surprised that it went that way.
Now he's actually creating his own competition. He's bringing back WCW. So.
Yeah.
Did you like the gimmick a lot when you were doing it, the Norman character?
I liked it as a babyface because nobody took it that serious as a heel.
Right.
They cheered me and laughed at it. And they wanted me to hit Teddy, so they wouldn't buy it as a heel. No matter what I did, they cheered it. And they just wanted me to hit Teddy and get it over with, And they could have did some good business there with me and Steve Williams if they would have teamed us up. They put us together for like a week, and Steve was never that committed to them because he had his deal in Japan and everything else. And but I would have liked to have a run with him and I as a tag team, because I think it would have done really well.
What are your thoughts of Teddy Long?
Teddy's a funny guy too. He's hell, when I seen him resurface, or heard he resurfaced in WWF, I was shocked. I thought he was long gone away from this business, and he was my manager, and I guess he deserves everything he got. He's worked his way up. He used to put the ring up, then he refereed, then he managed, and so whatever he gets, more power to him. I hope he has success and does well for a long time.
What are your thoughts and memories of your series with Kevin Sullivan?
It was good for me because I know that Kevin was on the booking committee and everything else, so whatever they wanted to do there was going to benefit me because they were calling the shots.
Right.
Kevin had some good ideas with me when we did the stuff with Nancy, with Woman, with the painting, and the match where we ended up in the bathroom. And I liked Kevin's ideas. We had a good little run there. I think it could have went a little bit longer, but you didn't know who was pulling the switches to end it. You never knew who was, you didn't know if it was over tonight or over the next night or what it was. So, but we had a good little run there. I liked it.
Did you like Kevin outside the ring too? Was he good?
Yeah, sure.
What are your memories and thoughts of Mick Foley? Because you worked a little bit with Cactus Jack back then.
The first night I ever seen him, we were at Center Stage in Atlanta making a TV. And I'd never seen him. I'd heard about him from Texas and everything else. And he used to have a ramp that went up about, maybe at an angle like that, straight up to the ring there at Center Stage. It wasn't a huge building. And I was on neck, so I was watching him through the curtain. And he got out and rolled the two landing mats up and put this guy on the floor. He went up and dropped an elbow from the top rope to the cement. It had to be 10 feet. It was the most ugly sound I'd ever heard in my life. It sounded like somebody dropped like 100 watermelons off the top rope and they all smashed. And Jim Ross was standing next to me and he said, "That guy's been doing that for many years." And I was amazed. Some of the stuff he does is just unbelievable.
Right.
I'm amazed he can even walk, which, I guess he is pretty banged up. But
yeah, he's really bad.
Yeah, the stuff he done was just unbelievable. It's a hell of a way to make $1.
Did you like working with him too?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I like working with him.
Easy
to work with. He was willing to really go the distance with me with the Norman character because it kind of mixed, his character and mine. And then some people got in his ear down there, Jim Cornette and them, and said, "Hey, do this, do that." But it was up to him and I. We would have had a real good run together, but once again, a lot of politics.
All right. What are your thoughts of Jim Cornette?
I always think Cornette was probably 100% for Jim Cornette. That's the best way I can say it. I didn't do a lot with him. I didn't spend a lot of time down south other than he was around me in WCW. But, I don't... I always thought he was just really overrated. I didn't see any great drawing power there. Other than he had a couple of decent tag teams that he worked with,
Right. Is there anybody else that you didn't really like in WCW as far as because of politics or working with? Or?
Probably Ole Anderson and Jim Herd were the two. you couldn't even really dislike Hurt because he was just so stupid.
Right.
I mean, he didn't have a clue what was going on.
He was a pizza guy.
Yeah, he didn't have any idea what was happening or why it was happening. And I guess you shouldn't blame him. You should blame the people that hired him, who helped put him in that position to try to run a wrestling business. I mean, he didn't know. There's 10,000 wrestling promoters out there from small territories that could have did a much better job. But, you know, the executives in the mustaches and the striped shirts think they got to hire a guy who spent 6 years in college, which you don't need to do.
Right.
You needed to spend 20 years on the road to know what was going on, you know. Ole was just an idiot. Ole destroyed more careers down there than, you know, he damn near killed Luger off with that Stan Hansen thing, and he didn't like my character. He didn't like Funk. He didn't like, you know, he was just an arrogant prick, you know.
A lot of people say that.
He should have never been in that position either. You can't, when Vince is going full bore entertainment, you can't go on national TV and say we're going to take this back to 1950s wrestling. I mean, people don't want to see old black and white reruns. I mean, other than if you want to sit down for a half-hour laugh, you don't want to see your wrestling business go backwards either.
All right.
So what do you want to go backwards for? Nobody's buying that. Nobody's buying you out. You laid down, even in Calgary, you laid down for 30 seconds with a hold on and they're screaming, boring, boring. They don't want to see that. Nobody want to see that. Ole was, yeah, he was, well, he killed my character off, and he just his attitude, never no reason for it or no rhyme for it, or other than he was an ass.
All right.
You know?
Now you went from having real athletic matches with Owen and Pillman,
Yeah.
and then you went to WCW. Were you ever frustrated, or did you say, "Oh, this is easier, and I'll get paid"?
I think I had a really hard time adapting that. Not wrestling. I mean, they didn't care if I sat in the corner and scratched my ass, or with the Norman character, they didn't care what I'd done. Take my shoes off and sniff them. And they laughed at it. I wanted to still wrestle. That's what I was saying earlier. A couple of times they came to me and said, "Okay, forget the character, go out and work with Pillman or whatever."
Right.
And we had good matches. But I would go out, I would come back at some nights and really be frustrated, like, God, that's a lot of crap. And they'd be standing behind the curtain saying, "Great, that's what we want."
Huh.
I had a real hard time until the end of it. When Ole started killing it off, I was just developing it in my mind. I was just putting it together where I thought it was going to work.
Right.
I was going to take the character to WWF. And Pat Patterson came out to just outside of Hartford one night there. What the hell's the other little town they run there in Connecticut? No, it doesn't matter. He come by and I was supposed to have a match that night. And Funk said, I was traveling with Terry. He said, have a Norman match and we're going to work it out where you can get out of here and switch.
Right.
And the guy I was supposed to work with, flight didn't show up. And they had me wrestle some young local guy from Connecticut. And it just stunk.
Right.
It was horrible. I admit it just stunk. And Pat told Terry, "What the hell do you want that guy for?" It was horrible. So, you know, things can happen like that.
Right, right.
You know, one night good, one night bad. So.
What are your memories of Eddie Gilbert?
I liked Eddie. Eddie was a straight shooter with me. He helped me a lot with the Norman character, and he liked it, and he kept telling me, you know, keep working on this, keep working on that, and I liked Eddie. I had fun with him too.
You think he had a great mind for the business?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he could have booked WCW.
Definitely, without a doubt.
He could have booked it easy. He was one guy that legitimately loved this business. He knew every angle, every finish. I mean, he had been through Tennessee, Texas. Where are you going to see them more? I mean, they did everything in the world in those things.
Right.
They had guys in fishnet stockings and everything else, and he knew that. I mean, he was 100%.
Stood on the game.
Could have booked it, and then he knew he had to back off sometimes because it becomes a matter you got to take care of yourself. You know.
What about Dick Murdoch? Memories of
I was just talking to somebody about Dick the other day. I liked Dick. He was funny. He's typical old redneck, you know. He stop at the same restaurant every time you're in the same town, order the same meal, drink his beer, you know. Everything's bigger and better in Texas. That was Dick. You know, he was funny.
All right.
Yeah, we had fun with him. And me and Funk used to get him so wound up. Eddie was there, traveled with us too. Yeah, that was unfortunate. He passed away too. He was a funny guy.
Huh.
He didn't give a shit when he told WCW. They sent him home for a year and paid
I heard
him.
about that with they asked him what was wrong with the company, and he said, "You motherfucker."
Yeah, go home, we'll pay you.
Right.
He's under contract. Yeah, the best deal in the world.
You also had a good match with Ric Flair, I believe. What are your memories of your match with Ric?
That was another guy that some days we seemed like we were gonna mesh and maybe do something together, and then we would back off to where to use the same word again, politics. He couldn't jump in and say, yeah, maybe I can do something with this guy when Ole and them were saying we're going to phase him out and get rid of him because you're contradicting somebody. So it was such a game there. It was like I said, you never knew what was happening from week to week. But Flair, he's been great for this business. He's been around forever, so.
Right.
But I think I could have did something with him if it would have been let go,
What about Paul Heyman? Some of your early memories of Paulie?
I think Paul was a good talent. I'll give him credit. He was a good talker. He had a swagger, kind of a good character to him. I wasn't around him. He was kind of in and out of WCW when I was there. He was trying to start ECW and he was trying to do other things. So I wasn't around him a lot, but he was a credit to the business.
Right.
Yeah, he was good.
You said you traveled a lot with Terry?
Yeah.
What was he like outside the ring?
That's one of the craziest person I've been around in my life.
Huh.
Funny guy.
He's hilarious.
Slow. Christ, I'd be second, third match for WCW. He was in the main event, and he'd be done at 11 o'clock. We'd still be in the building at 1 in the morning. He'd be talking, and oh Christ, he'd talk to anybody about anything. And we had some funny times. I was sharing a room with him in Philadelphia one time, and he was getting a call from an actor from California somewhere, and I thought it was Michael Hayes upstairs in the hotel screwing around.
Right.
It was Patrick Swayze. I kept hanging up. Fuck you, I'd hang up. I'm trying to go to bed, and he told me the next morning, Norman, did somebody call looking for me? He was out somewhere. I said, yeah, somebody did. They called my house. You hung up on them. They called and told me. I said, oh, shit. So he gave me hell for that for a long time.
Right.
But, unbelievable talent because he's still going.
Yeah.
I know I can do it.
Yeah.
I drove him around for a year. He had a broken bone in his back. Still wrestled every night. I took him to a hospital in New Orleans. He had staph infection so bad he couldn't walk. They put him in the hospital. But he still every night.
That was like 89, I think.
Yeah, he still worked. He's just a tough character. That's a different era when you talk Dory Jr. and Terry and Murdoch and those guys. They were just tough guys,
right.
Tough characters. You had to work. That's how you got paid.
They're all wrestlers.
Yeah, they were just. I'll take those kind of guys. You take a Funk, Murdoch from that era, that in that time. Every one of these young hotshots that thinks they're a star and not making money, they should kiss those guys' ass every time they see them. And that includes Hogan. Hogan was a tremendous credit to this business. These guys who think they're stars nowadays would be nothing without Hogan. Hogan made this business. When he come in the WWF and took off with the WrestleManias and stuff, these guys all want to badmouth him. They should all kiss his ass. They wouldn't make no money if he went to set the table for him. I will go to my grave saying that Hogan probably made and saved the business. It was dead. It was tremendous.
Right.
I don't owe him nothing. I was around him for a few months in WWF. Treated me very good. Treated me nice. We were on a trip to Europe together. But that may have sounded funny earlier when I said including Hogan. When I was saying kissing ass, I don't mean he should. I mean they should kiss his.
Right.
Every one of them. Every time they see him, he started it.
You were talking earlier on about when Ole took over the book. He changed the gimmick and made you Trucker Norm. Mm-hmm. What were your thoughts on that? Were you able to say anything at all?
I asked why, and the only answer I got was they were taking it back to 1950 wrestling. And I believe in the 60s or sometime in that era when he was booking somewhere up in Ohio, he had a trucker character, and he claimed he thought it was going to take off, and it was dead from day one. It stunk, and nobody cared.
What was the gimmick based on? I forgot.
I was supposed to be a truck driver who they tried to say that I went from Norman to Trucker Norman because my dad had been a truck driver and he was killed in a trucking accident or something, and I was supposed to be honoring his memory or something by becoming a truck driver, and
right.
It just stunk. It was horrible.
I think actually WWE now is playing one of your matches on the 24/7 channel with Cactus.
Oh, are they?
Yeah. I think you're doing that gimmick on there. So.
Well, they picked a bad match.
Why did you wind up leaving WCW? How did that come about?
Ole phased it out. Ole phased me out to where I didn't mean anything anymore, and then they didn't renew my contract, and it was just time to get out of there. I had an opportunity to start going to Mexico, where I went quite a few times, 4 or 5 times, and
for what company? EML or
no? I went for Arena Mexico, which was it wasn't AAA. It was the other one. I just called it Arena Mexico.
Right.
Paco Lutheroth, or whatever his name was. And I went down there 4 or 5 times as Aaron Grundy. Tag team with another big guy named Solomon Grundy, who had been a big star there. And it was just time to get out of WCW. It wasn't working anymore.
Right.
You know, I wasn't getting money bookings, and you know, just had no idea where it was going. You know.
What was your fondest memory of WCW?
Fondest memory of WCW was probably the reaction from the kids, even in towns that were hardcore heel towns, Philadelphia, up in that area where they cheer the heels the whole match. They would still bring me teddy bears, and they liked it.
Right.
It was kind of a pity thing. They felt sorry for it, you know. And I think that was probably the best. I think that was the most I got out of it. You know, and I would redonate those, and yeah, I think that was it. Just seeing the reaction of the kids, knowing that it would work, knowing that the character did work,
right,
was what meant a lot to me.
You went to Mexico. What was it like to adjust to that style down there? Because it's very different.
I got into an interesting situation there. I went down there. I was about probably 360 pounds, and you're going to wrestle guys who aren't that big. And my partner, who was Solomon Grundy, had been there before me, and they brought me in as his brother. And he wouldn't take a bump. He wouldn't go off his feet for anything. He didn't care. A lot of 6-man tag matches, which they're horrible. They're like watching an anthill. You don't know where guys are. And I was taking bumps. I was taking slams and backdrops and everything. And so, not speaking the language very well and not knowing what was going on, they were going to the Mexican guys were going to the promoter and saying, we really like working with myself, Aaron Grundy. He's helping establish us. He's getting us over. I always went to foreign countries believing I was going to get the hometown guy over. I mean, they're there. So I was doing the same thing in Mexico. And all of a sudden, they wanted to get rid of Solomon, who was the star. He was supposed to be a star there. And they wanted to put me in the single matches, which ended up hampering this next time I went back. But we had such a conflict there that I was bumping and working and he wasn't, that we didn't work together very well.
Right.
You know, so they kind of phased him out, and then he brought me back like 3 more times. And I had a hair match there, and I had the whole deal, you know, the old Mexican. I did everything but take a mask off, which I didn't have on ever. So, yeah, I had a hair match, and I left after that, and I went back another time after that. So.
Did you like it down there? Or?
No.
No.
It's a hellhole.
Okay.
The nicest arenas aren't nice.
Right.
I mean, there's no toilets in half of them, no toilet paper, dirty, stinky. I watch guys shit in the corner, wrestlers shit in the corner, and leave it there. Oh, it's terrible. Wrestling bull rings, dead cows outside. You know, it's just a hellhole. I mean, that's terrible.
Did you know that? I guess. Well, how did you find out WWE was interested in you then?
WWE called me up. I'd actually just got home from Mexico, and I had been home for a little bit. And
actually went to Global, right, before that?
Oh, yeah.
I forgot about Global. We'll talk about Global first.
Global was $1 million pipe dreams with a $10 budget.
Right.
I mean, they were offering us all kinds of money, and you're going to wrestle 4 times a month, and we're going to pay you $4,000 a month, and all this kind of stuff. And Joe Pedicino was telling us that he had this oil guy from Iraq or someplace, and the guy money was no object, and oh geez, we never did have a house show. We made some TVs, and
it was all ESPN, I think, right?
Yeah, it was all ESPN. They wouldn't let us plug the shows. We couldn't say that we're going to be in Dallas next week. They wouldn't do any of that. And,
right.
Oh, it was funny. Me and Cactus were supposed to be team there, I believe, the Cartel or something. They were
right.
Me, him, Rip Rogers, and there was a 4th one. I can't remember who the 4th one was now. But Joe, he had champagne taste and a beer budget there. We got to the point where we were wrestling in Dallas at the old Sportatorium, and we were having to go home and wait for a check to be mailed to us, and it was signed different by somebody every time we got one. And so guys would just stop coming, they wouldn't go.
Right.
You know, it just wasn't worth it anymore.
What are your memories of Scotty Levy down in Global, Raven?
I knew him a little bit when he was in the WCW.
Scotty Flamingo?
Yeah. I always got the impression he didn't like me. I don't know why, maybe just a clash of personalities or whatever, but I don't think we ever got along that well. Never no hard words, but
right.
I just don't think he ever really liked me. So I didn't do a whole hell of a lot with him, you know. Did a little bit here and there with him, but nothing.
Right.
I believe he might have been the other one of the Cartel. I believe he might have been the fourth one.
He might have been.
I think he was.
Actually.
No, you mentioned that. Yeah, I think he was the fourth one.
What about Jerry Lynn and Sean Waltman? You remember some of their matches?
Oh, sure. They stayed at my house. I ran a few promotions up in northern Michigan, and they slept at my house.
Right.
The kid there, what's he doing now? Can I?
Which one?
1, 2, 3.
He's just doing indies and stuff
Is
like
he?
that.
Yeah, he slept at my house a couple of times when I ran some shows. I brought him and Jerry, and Jerry was a good talent.
He's awesome.
Jerry is he still wrestling?
Yeah, he's still wrestling.
Is he out in this area?
Well, he's doing a lot of stuff for TNA right now.
Oh,
he's like
okay.
an agent now.
Oh, good.
Yeah, he just got.
Oh, he was a hell of a talent. Yeah, he was good. They were both good. The kid, they came through Michigan a few times. They would do anything.
Right.
And they were just young guys. He was 17, 18, 19 years old, maybe the most.
But
I like Jerry. When I first seen him work, I said, this kid can really work.
I think one of the things that put him on the map is they had a 2 out of 3 falls match, I think, for Global.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, they did well. He went through WWF, right? The kid went through there as a...
Sean Waltman.
Yeah, he was there when I left. Yeah, he was... Yeah. How long did he get that?
He was there for a long time.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he had a lot of, like, demons. And then
Did he break his neck or something, or get hurt back
He got
one time?
a concussion, but I think they brought him back after that. He
got messed up on shit, too, I guess.
Yeah.
Too bad.
So, he also went to WCW and then went back to WWE. So.
Yeah.
As far as, I guess, WWE, you eventually, wound up there after Global.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
They called my house. I was kind of surprised. I had sent the tape to Sergeant Slaughter, who was looking at talent at that time, and they called my house and brought me in for a tryout, and that's what Brett pulled me aside and said, "This is what you got to do. You got to work this way and that way." And I went out and did it, and they brought me back to another TV taping down in Augusta, Georgia, or something. And I walked in the back room with my bags, and Vince just met me at the door and said, "Let's take a walk." We walked around the whole arena.
This is the first time you met Vince?
Yeah.
Okay.
He said, "Let's take a walk." He said, "I like your style. I think we can do something with you." And they put that Friar Ferguson or Monk gimmick on me, and I never really got an answer from Vince, about that, but he was going through some legal problems at that time. He was going to federal court or something.
It was like 92.
Yeah. And I guess he got some calls the first Monday Night Raw that the Monk ever aired for churches and Catholic churches or whatever, and said, "Man, that's just horrible." And it got back to me that he was worried about the bad publicity and just ended it. Said he called me at home and said, "We're not going to run with that character at all." Took care of me, paid me for 2 or 3 months to stay home, paid me every week.
Right.
Check come every week. I'll give him credit for that. And then they brought me back, and they had me out in Connecticut there for about 2 days, and they got this library of stuff they were going through. They had a pizza delivery guy, and they had a handyman with half my ass crack showing. And then they finally came up with the Booger character, and it was originally supposed to have a big mask. It was supposed to be like a gargoyle thing, kind of like Vader was. And their production company, their crew or whatever they called it, they had like a full library of stuff. It was very impressive. And I went home with drawings and everything. I said, "Hey, this thing might work." And then they called me back and said that Vince thinks it looks too much like Vader. He doesn't want to do it. So they brought me back without the mask. And I think it was kind of flat after that because it never took off. It wasn't a good character for me.
The Booger gimmick?
Yeah, it didn't work.
All right. As far as when you first went up there, you had a tryout match?
Yeah.
Who did you work? Do you remember?
I believe I wrestled Barry Horowitz.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I wrestled Barry.
How was that match?
It was good. Barry was a good worker. He knew what his job was.
Right.
He knew how to make people look good, and in the right opportunity, he probably could have got a push somewhere. And he was a good wrestler.
How would you compare the locker room, in WCW to WWF?
I would have to say it was a lot more cutthroat in WWF. We were all on guaranteed money down in WCW, so there wasn't really. The management was piss poor. They were fighting more than the boys were.
Right.
In WCW. WWF, it was kind of the guys were all bucking to be on the pay-per-views and on WrestleMania, and there was little cliques that took care of this and took care of that, and I don't think that it was ever. I never seen any real. Well, you don't much anymore anyway, because I'm thinking old school again. But there was never any closeness there. There was always a little bit of always a cutthroat. I'm not complaining, but I believe I got a really shit deal when I went in there. The character stunk. They had seen me as the Friar Ferguson, then I come back 3 months later as something else. And my first 3 months on the road, I wrestled Tito, who was a good wrestler, but he was retiring. He told me the first night I wrestled him, I don't want to take any bumps, nothing. I'm not going to get hurt. Huh. So now I'm trying to be an aggressive heel with this character, and it was rotten.
Were you able to go up to any of the agents at all? And
They, he was trying to become an agent, so they didn't want to listen to me.
Right.
And then I got Kamala the month after that. So, I mean, you got 200-300-pound guys and they're walling around, and that one stunk.
Right.
So I had 2 bad months in a row. And then after that, I can't remember, I got somebody else my 3rd month, and it wasn't very good again. So I got off to a bad start there. I didn't like the character, and my first 3 months were rotten.
Right.
So you can see yourself starting to get phased out quick. You can tell they're not going to do nothing with it. So it never got off to a good start.
Was Vince approachable where you could go talk to him at all, or?
Yeah, Vince was approachable. I never felt. I went to him a couple of times and questioned him. Is this thing got any life left to it or whatever? And he was good to talk to. I'm not saying he had an open door. I could run in and talk to him, but
right.
Yeah, if you said, hey, you got 5 minutes, yeah, he was good.
Right. What were your initial impressions of Vince when you first got to meet him? Was he larger than life character, or?
I think from not watching wrestling, I wasn't that wow.
Right.
I was more interested in trying to talk business to him. We took a walk and he said, it was his word, on everything.
Right.
If he said, yeah, I'm interested in hiring you, great. So when he approached me, I figured, well, this must be pretty good because if he didn't want me, he was going to send somebody else out and tell me,
right.
Hey, it didn't work out or whatever, But I didn't have any issues with Vince. I didn't have any. The only problem I had with Vince at the end was the agents, the Hebners and whoever else, George Steele, and there was one more.
George Scott?
No, it wasn't Scott. It
was.
No, it was one more agent.
Lanza?
Maybe no. New Zealand guy. Tony Grea. They came to me after a TV meeting and said, Vince is going to switch that character babyface because the kids like saying booger. It was like they were getting away with swearing. So he said they were going to switch it babyface and get a little mileage out of it. I went back 3 weeks later to a TV and they told me it was done.
Huh. Wow.
So I don't know. I heard some rumors that some of the boys got to Vince and complained about me and stuff like that. And if that's true, that'll be. Live with politics, I can live with that.
Do you know what some of the guys did?
I heard we were in Detroit one night wrestling at the Palace or someplace, and they had a monitor set up where they were showing, you could see the matches. And I made a comment about somebody who was wrestling, and I said, geez, their guys are really busting their nuts or something. Just joking.
Right.
Not thinking it would go any farther than that. And somebody ran with it and said, yeah, the Booger's in there saying the guys are the shits or something, and that festers into being a big pissing contest. And in the long run, it did me a favor. I'd been wrestling 20 years, 7 years in Calgary. My body was all beat to hell. And my son is 6'3", 290, 15 years old. He's already been talked to by a couple of colleges. So when I wrapped up my WWF run, I did a few independent things here and there. But I went home and I've been watching him for 4 straight years now, and everything happens for a reason. I enjoy it.
Right.
That's why I don't take many shows anymore. I won't miss any of his high school events. I won't miss anything he does. That's my life now.
Does he want to get into the business too, or?
I hope he's smarter than that.
Right. I guess, what was the locker room like when you were in WWE, and who did you ride with?
I rode with Jeff Jarrett quite a bit. I rode with, was Mike Rotundo there, or did I ride with him mostly in WCW? Me and Mike crossed paths a lot. I don't know if I was with him then or not. I rode with the Samoans a lot.
Right.
I did a lot of traveling with the Samoans, Fuji.
Right.
I rode.
Big River.
Yeah.
Did you get to see any?
Oh yeah, they were pretty heavy stuff there too. Yokozuna, I was with traveled with him a lot.
Right.
Yeah, I like the Samoans. We called it, what was it, Rikishi when we just called him Junior. He was a nice guy. I traveled with him a lot.
All right.
So yeah, mostly those guys.
Did you find the Booger gimmick ever to be humiliating? Ugh, I can't pronounce that word tonight.
Yeah, I think it was just. I think Vince was paying me, and he finally said, "Geez, we better get this guy in here to do something." And I just thought the gimmick was just dumb. It didn't mean nothing. It might have been funny as a babyface. Hell, I could have went out with boxes of Kleenexes or whatever and had fun with it, And basically, it could have been a bald Norman character is what it could have been. But as a heel character, it was just dumb. I didn't like it from day one, and I still don't like it.
All right. You worked with Bam Bam too, Bam Bam Bigelow.
Yeah, worked with Bigelow quite a bit.
What are your memories of those matches?
Oh, he was a good worker for a big guy. He was a hell of a worker. That's a funny place because guys who think they're top-notch guys, they're going to do as much with a guy. I was a bottom guy there. They're not going to bust their ass with me. They want to go 5-6 minutes and be done, and that's it. they're going to save it for a pay-per-view or a big house show. Or it's a funny attitude there. I mean, there's a pecking order of who's top and who's bottom, and that's how they treat you.
Right. Did you were you there when the Clique was coming together with Sean and Scott Hall?
No.
Okay.
No.
That was before.
Yeah, I don't think Scott had came back yet even before I left.
Okay.
What did he come back as, Razor Ramon or something?
Yeah.
No, I don't think. Let me think.
I forgot what year he came back.
Was he done by the time I got there, or was he after me?
He might have been after, I think.
Yeah. No, I wasn't there when that happened.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess he got a pretty tight little thing going there for a while.
Right. What are some of your memories of the pay-per-views, working for some of the big pay-per-views compared to WCW's pay-per-views?
I can't make a whole lot of difference comparison to them. To me, you were there all day from 9 o'clock in the morning till whatever time at night, and I didn't do that many pay-per-views for WWF. I did, I think, a Royal Rumble and what's the one, Survivor Series, and
right.
And I was at WrestleMania 10. I think I did a dark match with the 1-2-3 Kid.
Oh wow.
In Madison Square Garden. So I don't. I guess I could say I enjoyed the WCW ones. I was involved. I was doing more. We didn't have that many pay-per-views actually in WCW at that time. We had them Clash of Champions that were free.
Right.
They were similar to shows. We were there all day and national TV and everything else, and I enjoyed those. Those were good. Good publicity and the Great American Bash deal and that whole thing. But I don't think my pay-per-views with WWF would have been nothing too stellar.
All right. Did you leave on good terms with those guys?
I have to believe I left on good terms with Vince, who's the only one I really care about.
Right.
I don't think I had any hard feelings with him. I would have liked to have sat down with him and asked him why he finished it the way he did. If he was going to switch it babyface and he let guys get to him and tell him that I did something wrong, at least let me defend myself or say if it's right or wrong. And I got enough balls. If I did screw up in front of somebody, I'll apologize.
Right.
Don't do everything behind my back and end it that way.
How did you find out that you were getting released?
I guess you don't get booked anymore. You don't get a handful of airline tickets, and you're not on the booking sheet. I guess you're done.
Right.
Nobody ever comes up to you and tells you you're done.
You weren't under contract at all at that time? Or?
Yeah, I had under contract, but the contract with WWF was only for services. It wasn't for money or anything.
Right.
It was only to wrestle, and basically it protected him. It didn't protect us.
Right.
So and it's all merchandising and stuff like that. And it was funny because they left me off for like 2 months, and all of a sudden they called me up and sent me tickets, and I went on the road for another 2 months, and then I was done again. So I didn't know what the hell was going on, and finally I knew it was time to be done, get out of there.
Right. Did any of the other guys ever rib you about the Gimmick?
No, I don't think so, not directly. I'm sure that there were so many dumb gimmicks, it was hard to rib anybody.
Right.
I mean, you got a Red Rooster, you got a Booger, there was a lot of dumb ones.
Right.
So I don't think anybody had a lot of room to hit anybody,
What have you been doing since your time in WWF?
After I left WWF, I got into the security business. I'm actually the area manager for Midwest Patrol Security Company for the state of Michigan. I'm the manager for the whole state of Michigan. That's worked out pretty well for me. I ran a wrestling school for a while. I trained a few guys. I quickly found out that those guys are flakier than the guys who are in the business. I mean, I got guys showing up that want to get in the business. They're 140 pounds, and we got guys who show up and they're all cut up already. And I said, "Where do you work? Nowhere." Jesus Christ, what are you doing? I think that's funny, busting light bulbs over their heads, and they don't have a clue. They can't wrestle. They can't work. All they want to do is go up to the top rope and do somersaults and high spots. Is all. You try to slow them down and show them a move or a match, they don't have a clue.
Right.
And don't want to learn it.
What do you think about wrestling today? How nobody wants to tell a story anymore in the tall spots?
No story, no nothing. That's why all the matches are so short. Go out and do 4 or 5 minutes of spots and get out of there.
All right.
It's all talking. It's a 1 or 2 hour plug for the next pay-per-view is all it is. There's no wrestling,
You think good business will ever go back the way it was back in the 80s?
No.
Okay.
Can't do it. You can't do it because the second you try to, even with Vince being the dominating promoter in the world, if he slowed it down and tried to re-educate people, somebody else would continue going the other way.
Right.
Somebody would get on TV somewhere and open wide up, and And then, I was talking to somebody tonight earlier before I come in to see you guys. When I went to South Africa the first time, a guy used a full Nelson for a finish. He put it on the guy. The people in the crowd came to their feet. They knew it was over.
Huh.
My second or third tour there, they opened up a opposition company, and they brought in 2 Mexicans and a guy named Bobby Jaggers. And Jaggers was catching these 2 Mexicans off the top rope on the floor and slamming them on the floor, and the 2 Mexicans are back in the ring before he is, and these people are sitting there going. But 6 months later, they kind of started watching it, and killed everything, and it was done.
All right.
Just killed it. Just killed the business. It was so easy, drop an elbow, cover the guy, done.
Yep. Was it hard to adjust to life after wrestling for yourself?
No. That's funny. A lot of people think it's, I know a lot of the wrestlers can't quit, can't give it up. And I jumped into the security business, which I kind of enjoy. And I got my son, who I was saying my son is 6'3", 290, 15 years old, playing football, wrestles a little bit. And he does track, and I think he'll probably play a pretty high level of college football. And that takes all my time. If I got to take him to lifting or running or practice or camp, every day is good for me.
All right.
I don't care. I'll sit there and watch it for 2 hours and take him the next day.
All right.
That's my whole life right now. I got a daughter. She's 14. She's a straight A student. I don't know where the hell she got that from, but she didn't get it from me.
All right.
Didn't get it from her mother either. But yeah, she does real well too. So it wasn't too hard for me to adjust. I didn't like the traveling anymore. Traveling was getting harder and harder, and I did a lot of my wrestling in my career overseas, and now as an American, you don't feel safe going anywhere anymore.
Right.
So it's just it wasn't fun anymore. It was a grind. It was hard.
What were your favorite towns to go to?
I like Chicago. I like going into Chicago. I liked Atlanta. I enjoyed Calgary. I was there 7 years. As far as out of the country, I used to go to those wrestling tournaments over in Germany, where you stayed for 6 weeks or 2 months in one town. I really enjoyed Hamburg.
Is that for Autobahns?
I went once for Otto, and then I went 3 or 4 times for a guy named Rene Lazatez in Hamburg. And then I went to a couple in Austria. Yeah, I enjoyed those. I had a good time. I used to take my kid. My son was born. Excuse me again. I used to take him with me, and it was kind of funny. The first time we went, he was about 2 years old, and we were staying in a hotel, and sure as hell, right across from our hotel, they put up a circus for a month.
Huh.
And every day he'd wake up, he couldn't get adjusted to the time change. 2 a.m, he'd be knocking on the window, and he wanted to go to the circus. So we took him over there. Christ, it was still dark outside. We'd take him over there. And the animal trainer liked him. They used to come to the wrestling and watch the wrestling. And we got pictures of an elephant picking him up with his trunk.
That's awesome.
But it was fun. It was a good time.
I guess, did you ever watch shoot fighting? Are you into MMA?
Oh, yeah. I like it.
You like that
Yeah.
stuff? If you didn't do wrestling, what do you think you would have done?
When I look back at it now, I would have liked to probably got into teaching and been a high school sports coach or something along that lines.
Right.
I would like to have been a gym teacher or something where I was working with kids in sports. So that would have interested me.
Is there anyone you never got a chance to work with that you wish you could have?
When I first broke into wrestling, Kowalski was still wrestling every now and then, and he was always the main event. I was young,
Right.
but I would like to wrestle him because he trained me.
Right.
I would like to wrestle him once. I never actually got to wrestle Hogan. We were on a lot of tours together, but I never actually got to wrestle him. I would like to have had a match with Hogan. And
What was he like outside the ring?
Hogan?
Yeah.
Super. Yeah, unbelievable. Nice to me. We did a WWF trip. It was a hard-ass trip we did. I think we did like 12 countries in 14 days or something. And it was just kind of a going away deal, and treated me really good. I was new in WWF. I was a bottom guy, but he treated me like anybody else.
Right.
I'd never been around him that much. He signed autographs for a bunch of kids back home for me in my hometown, and took pictures with me and signed them to this kid and to that kid, and didn't blink an eye.
Huh.
So for a guy who was the biggest star in the business, he was great.
All right. Did you ever want to write a book, maybe?
Yeah, I would actually. I would be interested in that. I think between the traveling and the characters I wrestled and the characters I had, and I was really shocked not too long ago how close some people follow wrestling. I had a guy from North Carolina send me a list of every name I ever used in the wrestling business.
Huh.
And one night in South Carolina, I had come back from an overseas trip, and I went to a wrestling show. just to stop by and see the guys. The main event on the show was a guy that was supposed to be there named the Big O. He didn't show up. The promoter says, "Hey, do you want to work? I'm a guy short." So I worked as the Big O, and this guy knew that.
Wow.
One night. I don't know how the hell I know all this stuff.
Internet.
There's some people out there that put a lot of time into this stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's amazing what they know. But I would like to write a book sometime. You just don't know how honest you can be sometimes.
Right.
without hurting somebody.
What is your what is your favorite road story?
Oh, favorite road story. That would have been somewhere in Calgary. The world's strongest man up there, Bill Kazmaier, who they ribbed till he almost committed suicide, I guess. And
really,
they staged a fight there one night where two of the guys, Ron Ritchie and then Ben Bassarev, they were in the babyface van and they pulled over and were going to fight. And Kazmaier charged to break it up and slipped and fell down like this 20-foot hill. Came back up all soaking wet in mud. And then he wanted to fight one of the guys. And it was just unbelievable. Some of the stuff. Some of the road trips in Calgary, just unbelievable.
Right.
Yeah, it was.
Any good rib stories? Like, what is the greatest rib you've seen?
I think one of the most amazing things I could imagine was Dynamite Kid was the greatest ribber of all time, maybe him and Fuji. And he had that big Luke McMasters. He wrestled as Giant Haystacks, and he wrestled in Calgary as the Loch Ness Monster, 700 pounds, 6'11" or whatever. And he went in the bathroom to have a shit. And he would always fall asleep. No matter where he was, he'd fall asleep.
Right.
He wrecked like 20 cars falling asleep driving. It was like he wasn't killed. And he was in having a shit. And Dynamite sprayed a can of lighter fluid underneath the door and threw a match in there while he was in there.
Right.
700-pound guy trying to get up with his pants around his ankles. What the fuck's going on?
Right.
Flames and everything else. And Dynamite was brutal. He was brutal. Made cakes with baby shit in and give them to people. And it was brutal.
Would you ever go back to WWE if they ever called you to do a skit or anything?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, as long as I could talk to Vince straight one-to-one and ask him what he wanted and what it was going to entail, and go in and do it and leave, and it'd be fine.
I guess, where were you when you found out that Owen Hart passed away?
I was home. I was in my house in Michigan, and my wife got a phone call from somebody in Calgary and said a wrestler had got killed. Didn't know who it was, and we got a couple of neighbors who are crazy wrestling fans, and they called her up, or my neighbor called. No, the story went, somebody from Calgary called and said that they thought Owen had got killed. And then somebody else called and said it wasn't Owen, that it was somebody else. And my neighbor called, who was a wrestling mark, and she said that she heard it was Owen. So it took us to the next morning to actually find out.
Wow.
100%.
Wow.
I didn't want to call Calgary and ask somebody.
Right.
He's the one who killed her.
Right.
And then I think one of the brothers finally did call the house, Bruce, or somebody called and said it was him. Yeah.
Do you have any regrets looking back on your career?
Getting back to Owen for 1 second, when they called my house, I had probably met, I'm going to say 20,000 wrestlers in 20 years, different countries, every place else. A lot of them have died or committed suicide or overdoses or whatever. Not one of them ever fazed me, ever. When they called me Owen, told me Owen died, I cried like a baby. Just bothered me that it had to happen that way.
Right.
So, regrets in my career. I got some regrets. I never really understood what they wanted me to do in WWF, so I think I blew that opportunity. I got big there. I got really heavy, close to 400 pounds, believing that's what they wanted that character to be. And I found out later they complained that I wasn't moving as well as they wanted me to, and I never had any real direction what they wanted with that thing because I don't think they cared.
Right.
But I have a regret that I waited that long to get in there and never got to perform the way I think I could have.
Jim Ross or any of those guys? I know they were big with Yokozuna and some of the other guys that got big. They would tell them lose somebody.
Yeah.
They never came to you.
Never came to me and told me. Okay. I talked to Vince one time, and he never directly said it. He just said to me, he said, some of my best wrestlers are 250, 260, and he left it at that.
Right.
But nobody ever, I know with Yoko, they took him aside a couple of times, but nobody ever gave me that indication. Like I said, I actually thought that's what they wanted.
Right.
So the people who were supposed to be the bookers, Pat and those guys never had a minute at a time for me ever. I don't think Pat ever had a conversation with me, you know.
As far as the finishes and stuff like that, who would give you the finishes?
Usually the agent, whoever was on the road that night.
Right.
You know, if it was George Steele or one of the Hebners, or I think one Hebner was an agent, one was ref at that time, and Tony Gurria, you know, whoever was on the road would tell you. Arnold Skolin was on the road sometimes around New York. Yeah, that's usually who it was.
What were the Hebners like?
Good. Yeah, they were good guys. I guess they had some kind of falling out there too, I guess. And
right.
I don't know what it was, something over T-shirts or something.
Merchandising and stuff like
that. Yeah. But, yeah, they were decent guys. Sure.
What is your number one highlight moment, if you were to say it?
Career?
In your career, yeah.
I guess it would have to be a toss-up between establishing the Mucka Singh character as hard as it got over in a limited territory. I mean, you're talking a small territory, and that thing got national magazine coverage, and I mean, it went as high as it could on our TV, and the level the Norman character got to.
Right.
You know, I don't want to talk like a mark, but you know, people are telling me the character was as popular as Sting and Luger and Hogan when it was hot, and just to have it killed off like that just didn't make sense.
Right.
You know, it's a business. I thought they wanted to make money. You know, I'm not saying it was me. I mean, if you kill off anybody who's making any money, it's kind of dumb.
What were your thoughts of Luger? I was going to ask you as a worker. A lot of people said, you know, he wasn't the best worker, but you know, he had the body.
I think that's all he needed. I mean, he looked that good that I think he could get away with it. You know, a lot of guys who were successful in this business weren't that great at workers.
Right.
You know, some of them were good talkers. Some of them looked good. You know, Lex with that body and that persona he carried, he didn't need a whole lot more. You know, guys overrate how well somebody can work. The only time you got to worry about a guy that can really work is if you're going to put two guys in there and tell them to go 20, 25 minutes, somebody's going to have to carry it. But you're going 4 or 5 minutes a night, doesn't matter. You can pose for that and do your finish and go home.
Right, exactly.
You know, people buy it. And I think he knew that. He didn't need to be fancy or the greatest worker in the world. He looked that good.
Right.
You know?
If there's one match that you have to put on, if you were able to put on videotape to show your grandkids, what match would it be?
Owen Hart and I wrestled in the Calgary Stampede one night, a 32-minute match, and I was 320 pounds. It was nonstop for 32 minutes. I had wrestlers from other territories who've seen it on tape or seen it on TV call me and tell me how good it was. So that was important to me.
Right.
Yeah, we had the funny part is I don't know if I have it on tape.
Huh.
I don't know. I wasn't much of a nostalgia for wrestling. My first 2 wrestling dolls I ever had, my boy traded them for Richard Petty race cars, and I don't have them either. So I don't know.
You probably find them tomorrow at the convention.
Yeah, I went down and somebody will have one floating around somewhere.
Is there anything you want to say to your fans out there that you never had a chance to say before?
Yeah, I think fans in the smaller territories who really knew wrestling, I appreciated them coming out. These people come out every week, bought the same ticket every week. You know, and I was hard on fans a lot of time when I was a heel. I mean, I was heavy on them, and then I was an interesting character. I was a badass heel in Calgary, but every weekend I was out doing a charity event somewhere, so people couldn't figure it out. You know, I guess he's a dick in a ring, but he's out doing charity work. But the fans were good. They pay the money. They paid me, so I appreciate it.
All right.
Without them, we don't have a business. Without fans, you don't have football. Without fans, you don't have baseball. You know, it was great. I have to apologize to the ones who wanted to see me better in WWF. That was the worst couple of years of my career. It was national stage, and it stunk. So that's the worst part. I train a few wrestlers now. I have a couple not little, but I have a tag team I'm training now, and hopefully they do well. And if the fans know that I train them, you know, hopefully they'll respect them and give them a chance to make a little bit of money.
Right.
They're gonna try to come out and do a few shows out in this area. Actually, their tag team they go as the Purple Hornets. Actually, that was their idea. Kyle Hulkinen and Boots Barrett. And they got a little manager who's a pretty good looking girl, pretty little valet named Golden Bush.
All right. Nice name.
Yeah, nice name. I think they'll do both pretty big guys if they get a break, but hard business to break into, no small territories, and you can't afford to live on the road if you're not making no money. So if you don't get seen, nobody else wants you. So what do you do?
Do you stay in contact with anybody in the business?
I talk to Terry Funk every now and then. I talk to what the hell's he go as up here? Harvey Wimpleman, Bruno Lawler. I talk to him quite often. Every now and then somebody will just call and say hi. And I live so far up in northern Michigan. I'm about 600 miles north of Detroit. I'm way up in, I'm also on the Canadian border, so there's never no shows up in that area where guys get up there.
Right.
This weekend when I do a convention here, it'll be first time I've been around any guys in quite a while. I turn down a lot of work. I get a lot of calls to go to Ohio, Minnesota, Wisconsin. I don't go very often.
Right.
Hell, one time I went down and wrestled for a guy in Wisconsin. The next day he got busted. He paid us all with bad checks that he wrote off his own computer, and I had to check at home, and the idiot lived in Wisconsin, and when he typed the check up, he spelled Wisconsin wrong.
Huh.
So
Right.
I'm pretty careful who I go for. I don't miss it.
Right.
I guess if I missed it, if it irritated me that I wanted to be out there, I would pursue it. But I don't. I'm going to come out East Coast a little bit. I was talking to Eric Sims. He said he can get me a few shows out here, and I'll come once in a while.
Definitely. Well, thanks for being here today. It was
Great. Good enough. Appreciate it. Maybe we'll do another one.
Definitely. Thanks again.
All right.
Watch thousands of exclusive shoot interviews right now on TitleMatchNetwork.com.